I've been talking about Shakespeare now for, I guess a few weeks, and I've covered a number of Shakespeare plays. I want to turn now to perhaps Shakespeare's greatest play. And I think if you had a poll among Shakespeare scholars and Shakespeare aficionados, Hamlet would come in as Shakespeare's greatest play, and this is an assessment that I agree with, but at the same time, it is an assessment that is a little bit controversial. It's controversial because it's hard to say what is so great about Hamlet. It's a play of almost bottomless depths, and at the same time of great lines. Shakespeare is known for his elegant and unforgettable turns of phrase. Your youth is your salad days, for example. And to be or not to be, that's right out of Hamlet. And there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. That's Hamlet. Something is rotten in the state of Denmark. So Hamlet has got all these kind of one-liners, and it's got this mysterious main character, Hamlet, who is a student, he is an intellectual, he is a prince, he is someone who is set on a mission, but it's a mission that he doesn't seem to want to fully to carry out. And he doesn't carry out, not really, and even when he sort of does, it's toward the end of the play, and it's a very long play, and there are dead bodies all over the place by the time this even happens. So it is an odd play on so many levels. Let's take one of the great lines from the play that seems to summarize, you may almost call it the contemporary philosophy of our culture, of modern Western culture. To thine own self be true. This line is right out of Hamlet. It's uttered by Polonius. And it is sort of a great line in that it affirms this notion that so many people believe that, there's a kind of inner self inside of you, and you should be true to that, and that's your kind of true self, and your outer self is distorted by conventionality and by society, and so recovering your true self. Rousseau built a whole philosophy on this idea, which Shakespeare anticipated and wrote, expresses here better than Rousseau, 150 years before Rousseau, and yet what makes the line problematic is it is uttered by a man who's a complete fool. Polonius is this buffoonish father of Ophelia. He's pompous, he's ridiculous, and yet this line expressing a seemingly interesting and in some ways profound idea comes out of a doddering idiot. Now, I think, and what I'd like to do today, and I'm going to delve into this more deeply in a couple of subsequent podcasts, is I'm just going to give a sort of overview of what I think is the great theme of Hamlet and what makes Hamlet as a play so interesting and powerful. Its great theme is revenge. And revenge is a very interesting thing because it is something that we are all for, and yet we have reservations about, we have qualms about. Revenge is seen as a good thing in some ways. It is. Think about movies, for example, where some horrible wrong is done at the beginning and the audience is rooting for the main character to get his revenge. And there's a tremendous sense of not just satisfaction, almost elation, experienced both by the character and by the audience when this revenge actually takes place. Now, why is that? You might be familiar with an old phrase, revenge is a form of wild justice. And I think this is really what makes revenge both appealing and problematic. It's appealing because it is related to justice, and it's problematic because it is kind of wild. It doesn't go through the approved social system. Now, revenge doesn't make things whole. If somebody has wronged you, or someone has killed one of your relatives, and you go and kill them, well, you don't get your relative back. Revenge in that sense doesn't restore the status quo ante. It doesn't make you the way you were before. But what it does do, unmistakably, is it punishes the perpetrator. And we all have this belief, when we say things like, he got what was coming. You go to a movie and you see that the wrong is avenged. He got what was coming. And what you mean is that evil deserves punishment. And that's what revenge does. It inflicts the necessary and condign punishment on the perpetrator. And to that degree, what revenge does is it upholds moral responsibility. Now, what makes Hamlet interesting and powerful, I want to argue, is that you've got a character who has every reason to act, every reason to take revenge, and yet somehow cannot bring himself fully to do it. He knows he wants to do it. In fact, he concedes in many places the moral superiority of doing it, of acting. But instead of acting, he thinks, he wonders, he gets in a kind of introspective frame of mind. And what makes him do it? I want to argue what makes him do it is not what many people think. They think, oh, well, it's because Hamlet is a student. He's a bookish character. He's not a man of action. He's not a warrior. But while Hamlet is, in fact, a student, he's also a prince. Hamlet is a political man. In the same way that Brutus in Julius Caesar is a political man. Brutus is also studious. Brutus has a library. Brutus reads books. But Brutus is a political man in political society. And Brutus does not hesitate to act. When Brutus decides that Caesar is becoming a tyrant and Roman society will be better off without Caesar, Brutus moves forward and he never looks back. He has no qualms. He does it. He never regrets what he does. He accepts the outcome of the choices that he has made. So what is the difference between Brutus and Hamlet? Hamlet is a hesitator. I mentioned earlier that Aristotle talked about the mistake, the hamartia that a great man will make in a tragedy, the kind of character flaw, if you will. And in Othello, perhaps it's jealousy. And maybe in King Lear, it's a certain kind of excessive desire for flattery. And in Macbeth, it's vaunting ambition. Well, in Hamlet, this is off his flaw, his hamartia is believed to be indecisiveness. He hesitates. He delays. He doesn't act. In the Olivier version of Hamlet, the movie, there's a kind of preface that comes up on the screen before the movie begins. This is the story of a man who could not make up his mind. But the question I want to ask is, why? Why is it that Hamlet can't make up his mind? And I want to answer, the reason he can't make up his mind is Christianity. Hamlet is in a Christian universe. Hamlet is troubled by conscience. And I don't just mean conscience about what is the right thing to do here and now. Hamlet thinks a lot about death, not just the death of the king, his own death. Hamlet thinks a lot about the afterlife. Death for him is the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler ever returned. And Hamlet says very often, we want to hold on to life because even though there might be lots of evils in life, we don't know what evils await us after death. So here you have Hamlet in contrast with, say, Brutus. Brutus does not spend any time really thinking about the afterlife. And for Brutus, it's all about this world. There are right things to do, and Brutus is in fact motivated by conscience. Brutus thinks, for example, that acting in a conspiracy to overthrow Caesar is right. That is what a political man should do, and that is what he does. But for Hamlet, it's not so simple. For Hamlet, this is a matter not just of human beings acting in the world, but souls. What will happen to the king's soul? What will happen to Hamlet's soul? So in Hamlet, you have a huge clash between the warrior ethic, which is avenge the king, avenge the king's death. You are Hamlet, the son of the king, become the king, but be a just king. And that is morally unproblematic in the world of Julius Caesar, but it's morally problematic in the Christian world. And so here you have Hamlet, a man who knows he must act, but is prevented from acting by his Christian conscience.